Welcome everyone. Sam Leary here today. I am talking about how to become a UX writer without experience in 2023. So for those that don't know, I am again Sam Leary. I make videos for folks that are interested in learning how to leverage the most in-demand, most profitable writing skill right now to increase their personal, professional, and entrepreneurial opportunities, specifically for folks with a background in the humanities who might not feel like they have a skill that sets them apart when they enter professional or entrepreneurial spaces. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm a small business owner. I'm a first-generation business owner. I went the humanities route through undergrad. I was very fortunate in the professors I came across, the extent to which they were able to help me. I earned my MFA from Johns Hopkins, where I taught writing, reading, and digital media courses, and that eventually led me to start my own digital marketing agency and really double down on UX writing. So I've learned a lot over the last several years, and I want to communicate it to you. This is a growing field. It's in demand. It can deliver incredible value to small businesses, nonprofits, and people alike, and I want to give you the skills you need to get there. So today, on the subject of becoming a UX writer, even if you don't have any experience, we're going to talk about how to study the fundamentals, how to practice essential skills, how to expand your network, and how to gain real experience. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the lesson plan for today. Before I go through in a step-by-step manner, I want to talk about the quote I built today's video around, as well as the page that I built today's video around for my free guide, which is available on my website. So first and foremost, read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. Right now I'm talking about UX writing. If you want to learn UX writing, if you want to add it to your resume, if you want to build a business around it, you need to start studying. But it's easy to study because if you're here, if you're watching this YouTube video, that means that you're familiar with digital media, with interfacing with a digital device in some capacity. So what I'm basically saying, the reason I bring that up is because you need to start studying the different web pages, the different applications, the different digital products that you interface with. And once you make a habit of doing that, you're going to set yourself apart. You're going to set yourself up for success, and I'm basically going to explain how in this video. Beyond that quote, I want to talk about the page that you see right over here. So this is page 5 of my free UX writing guide, which is available on my website, samleary.com, if you sign up for my weekly newsletter, which I invite you to. Again, this is free. I've created it to help you no matter where you are in the UX writing process. And yeah, we're going to begin by talking about, the short answer. I'm not great at giving short answers. The less said about that, the better. There's my short answer of the day for you. And then we're going to talk about my experience, how I ended up owning a small business and helping businesses in my community and beyond. We're going to talk about studying the fundamentals, what I would study if I was starting from zero. We're going to talk about practicing essential UX writing skills, how to expand your network, and how to gain real-world experience. So I invite you to get this free UX writing guide. I've written it in a way that is meant to supplement these videos as a text. So get that and follow along. Before I move forward though, if this video is helpful, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the table of contents to my free UX writing guide. It's about 20 pages in total, and I'm going to be adding to it as time goes on and sending, updated copies as is necessary. But if you have any questions, leave me a comment and I will be in those comments. But let's talk about how to become a UX writer without experience. Now, so studying the fundamentals, practicing essential skills, expanding your network, and getting real world experience. This is the entire video consolidated into a single slide. Basically, this is my version of a short answer. So, that probably means I'll spend 45 minutes or whatever on this slide alone. But that joke aside, let's dig in. So I included this image because it's all about information architecture. This is from an article titled Complete Beginner's Guide to Information Architecture by UX Booth. So I love this because I think there's a lot of information here, even though it doesn't look super complicated. but it's going to get you thinking about classification and hierarchies, labels and tagging, navigation and wayfinding, search, and more. Basically, how users interact with digital products, be they websites, applications, or something else. But let's talk about studying the fundamentals right now. So you're going to want to learn UX design, information architecture, as this image suggests, and content strategy. These are three really, really important ideas. UX writing aside, I'm assuming that if you made it to this video, you understand that if you want to learn UX writing, you should, search the keyword UX writing. Beyond that, though, what's the terminology that's in orbit of UX writing, which can help you make better decisions? UX design, information architecture, and content strategy, all of which I will be talking about in greater detail shortly. So familiarize yourself with style guides, with industry standard tools, and different softwares that are going to help you speed up the process. I've mentioned different ways in previous videos. I've mentioned different ways that you can, prototype writing that you're trying to develop on your own, be it for a personal project or just practice. But you're definitely going to want to study UX design, information architecture, and content strategy, and familiarize yourself with ways of styling content and best practices. Typically, I recommend studying the A players, the Fortune 500 companies that are able to invest millions of dollars in their digital experiences. Beyond that, practicing essential skills, you want to hone your writing skills by creating a portfolio of work, including writing exercises and case studies. It's not always easy to get there. I will talk about it in greater detail shortly, but creating even a rudimentary UX writing portfolio is possible for anybody. There's a Picasso quote. If you've watched the previous videos, you've heard me mention it before. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Now, what does that mean for what we're talking about here? If you want to create a portfolio of work, maybe you don't have clients, maybe you're trying to volunteer but can't find the right business or organization that is seeking UX writing services. What you can do is just copy websites, copy applications that you find online. I'm not saying that if you build a portfolio that is full of examples that don't actually have a real use case, that you're going to find success, but what you're doing is training yourself. You're practicing those skills in a low stakes environment, and that's important. There's real value that you can get from doing that. Next is practice crafting microcopy, headlines, and calls to action, and understand how they work within the larger user experience. So this kind of is playing into information architecture. How are we constructing a digital experience so that we can use some sort of digital product to solve a user's needs? That's how we deliver value. That's how we get engagement and keep engagement high, how we get conversion rates, and ultimately how businesses, organizations, and people can make money. So expanding your network is also really important, and there are effectively two avenues that I want to recommend right off the bat. The first is to join UX writing groups online. Specifically on LinkedIn is really helpful, as well as different social media platforms and different websites. UX Writing Hub is a great resource. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. The UX Writing subreddit is also a really good place to go if you have any questions. People are great there and they can answer your questions very quickly. So I definitely recommend those digital avenues. Beyond that, though, attend industry events and conferences to learn from experts and connect with others in the field. Now, that requires, there's a barrier to entry there. You have to obviously buy into an event or buy into a conference. And that's unfortunately the trade-off that comes oftentimes with trying to, expand your network in physical spaces. Additionally, I would say if we're on the subject of physical spaces, there's, beyond just trying to establish some sort of UX writing network that you can leverage to increase your educational abilities. If you're serious about UX writing and you're throwing yourself into the craft, I definitely recommend joining a local professional network. So here in the United States, I'm not sure what the situation is like globally, but in the United States, I recommend chambers of commerce, and there are different economic development business organizations, oftentimes, again, there is a high barrier to entry, but whereas you might pay, in US dollar terms, 50, 100, 200 plus to join an event or a conference, the same cost can get you access to a year's worth of a community membership for like a chamber of commerce or an economic development organization. So that's my suggestion. Again, the two avenues are digital communities, which I would recommend exclusively UX writing, UX design, UX related fields, or communities, excuse me. And then the physical, the in-person communities, because the reality is you are probably going to be able to leverage your skills. You're probably going to be able to stand out as an expert if you do take this seriously in communities, physical in-person, real-world communities that are not populated exclusively by UX writers. So keep that in mind. I think it'll be encouraging and it can help you, get where you need to go. Getting real experience is what's up next, and it's difficult. It's not easy. You can look for freelance opportunities such as writing for blogs or small businesses to gain real world experience, or you can volunteer to get that experience and build your portfolio. Again, the Picasso quote that I love revisiting: good artists copy, great artists steal. If you're serious about wanting to do this, but you can't figure out a way to get in, I definitely recommend just copying the A players and trying to make small improvements. Additionally, as I've mentioned in previous videos, creating a personal site. It's going to be incredibly valuable. It's going to give you real experience, and it's going to function as a place where your portfolio can live. So WordPress is great. WordPress definitely takes some time to learn, but if you use a page builder like Elementor, for example, it becomes a little bit easier. Squarespace and Wix are good. They're much easier for a beginner to pick up and use, although they have certain limitations that WordPress doesn't necessarily have. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, leave me a comment and I will be happy to help. So let's talk about my experience now. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, I have always been a passionate writer. I'm still a passionate writer. I'm a fiction writer at heart. The novel's coming. I can't promise when it's going to be done. I'm kind of taking my sweet time with that, I guess. But really, my experience looks like this. I studied English and creative writing in undergrad. I was very fortunate in the professors I had. I went to the University of Wisconsin. They have a great writing department. Shout out the writers who helped me while I was there: Jakira Diaz, Amy Quanberry, there's Barrett Swanson, Marta Evans, Jack Ortiz, there's so many people. Ron Kuka, so many people, but I'll leave that aside. My MFA, undergrad helped me get to grad school. My professors, especially Jakira Diaz, again, shout out Jakira, she helped me get to that place. She helped me apply to different MFA programs. I went to Johns Hopkins, taught reading, writing, digital media courses. That was cool. On the other side of graduate school, I had to get a job because COVID hit, and that completely whatever. I don't have to talk about how COVID changed things for people. I'm sure everybody knows. But on the other side of my MFA experience, I worked a marketing job, which kind of helped me get some idea of, how I could leverage writing skills to make money online, to increase revenue for a business. I started familiarizing myself with different terminologies. Again, I'm a word guy, so that's I do well when you put a list of terms in front of me and all I have to do is learn them. But on the other side of the marketing job, I decided to, take a leap of faith and double down, started a digital marketing agency. I did SEO work for a long time, web design, and eventually made the transition to writing for user experience. That is where I can really nerd out and get super granular about, content being produced. But I've learned a lot, and it wasn't necessarily a clear path. It was just kind of following my interests and figuring out what worked, and also figuring out what businesses and organizations in my communities needed. So user research, persona development, microcopy, it says microscopy, but microcopy, content strategy, and usability testing to enhance user experience. That is how I ended up here. When I was working my marketing job, I effectively oversaw a WordPress website. And even though I wasn't adding to it on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, it was a low stakes environment. You know, it wasn't my primary job. So because it was kind of tangential, it offered me a low stakes opportunity to kind of figure out, you know, how do websites work? What are the problems of this website, and how can I fix them? Which eventually made me think more critically about how, you know, users were engaging with the site, and one thing led to another. I'm sure you can put the pieces together, but that's my experience, what led me to UX writing in terms of content and community outreach for my experience. So I developed user-focused content and marketing materials aligning with brand voice and style guidelines. I did it once for the job I was working at, and I've done it many, many times now that I'm a small business owner and work with different businesses and organizations. So I've managed all digital and print marketing efforts to promote organizational initiatives and events. That was in the beginning. Don't do so much print anymore, although there are jobs where, like, you know, just because of the nature of my work and what my team does, you know, we occasionally take on print marketing. But user experience writing, the reason why it's such a valuable skill to learn is because it's fundamentally about how a user or a reader engages with text. So I hope that gives you some idea of my experience, how I ended up here, what informs my perspective. You'll notice the images on the right side of this page. This again is my free UX writing guide. You can get it at samleary.com. Sign up for my e-newsletter. I drop weekly tips. Hopefully they're helpful. And then the main steps of information architecture design. This is a really, really important term that you absolutely should start researching if you're interested in UX writing. Information architecture. So I pulled this graphic from an article that I really enjoyed, which is by, I think it's Altec Soft. I'm not exactly sure, but don't know how you pronounce it. That's the name. You can go check it out. It's called How to Create Information Architecture for Web Design. So there are effectively like 6 phases, and it starts with conducting customer research, review and update content, apply card sorting for content classification, which if you don't know what card sorting is, it's effectively like, I mean, it is what it sounds like. It can be Post-it notes, sticky notes, organizing things, different important components of a website or an application, different experiences, digital products in a way that is likely to be, I don't want to say simple, but that's kind of reductive, but I can't think of a different word right now, but simple enough, you know, or maybe intuitive enough for a user, regardless of their experience, to understand and navigate, regardless of, you know, where they might be in the specific experience/digital product. 4 is build user-friendly hierarchies. 5 is create UI prototypes. And then 6 is test. So I don't want this to get confused with what I talked about in the previous video, which was like design thinking and different project management methodologies. What you need to know from this specific slide is just familiarize yourself with information architecture and the process that goes into designing a website or an application in order for it to basically be organized in a way that can generate a return on investment that isn't just going to, you know, frustrate and enrage users as soon as they open it. So that's that. Again, you have questions, let me know. Just say, Sam, slide number 2, and I'll give you an answer. So now we're talking about studying the fundamentals on the subject of how to become a UX writer without experience. So studying the fundamentals, as I mentioned in the last slide, information architecture is important. UX design is also incredibly important. That was the doorway through which I really started realizing that like UX writing was a thing. I got into web design, and shortly thereafter, as I was researching best practices, I discovered the term UX design, which just because I was an English major, creative writing, it was just not a term I had heard much about. So UX design, information architecture, and content strategy, all of this, these are the important fundamentals. You know, I would also love to talk about all of the different forms of writing that inform my approach to the craft of UX writing, namely like fiction, like narrative elements, and poetry as well. But you know, maybe that is for a different video. I'm really trying to make sure, you know, I hit the important notes here. So UX design, User-centric design principles. There's research, involvement, and feedback. Obviously, there are more principles. I have a video titled The 5 Key UX Writing Principles that you can check out. It's in the playlist. Playlist is linked in the description, so definitely check that out if you're interested. But user centricity. Understand user centricity. There's research. There is, different ways of involving users so that you're building digital experiences that benefit them and solve their problems. And there are different strategies for incorporating their feedback. That's super important. But it all starts with basically spending some time understanding what UX design is. There are people who dedicate their entire lives to being UX designers, and for good reason. It's incredibly important, especially as more and more things move to the online world, so to speak. So it's there's a lot that goes into UX design. You're not going to master it, but my point is simply, if you're interested in UX writing, you want to develop an understanding of UX design. You want to study the terminology and all the terms that are in its orbit and practice applying the principles. It's going to streamline your process. Additionally, information architecture. Study the A players, like I've said before. Amazon, there's so many products are sold on Amazon. How do they keep the content straight? It's a team of user experience folks, whether they are designers, researchers, writers, you name it. There are people whose entire job it is to, basically figure out what should go where and why it should go where. There's data-driven decisions that are made that determine why, X button is here and Y button is there. So, respect I would just say that the next time you visit a big site, be it Amazon or Apple or Microsoft, again, one of these A-player Fortune 500 companies, move a little bit slower and spend time thinking about how the specific locations of different elements make the experience easier or more difficult to use. That's kind of what I recommend in terms of like when you're interfacing with a digital product or experience, how you can get the most out of that time that you spend. So, and then learn like taxonomies, which is the branch of science that's concerned with classifications. This is like tangentially related, but it's helpful to start to think about like, how do we organize things? What is the science of organizing things into different categories? That's going to save you a lot of headaches if you are able to work to the position where, if you're small, if you're a freelancer, you're volunteering, maybe you're working on a website with a team, maybe it's just you. Understanding taxonomies is going to put you ahead. It's going to make you, it's going to give you a leg up. It's going to make it easier for you to say, okay, this is, in terms of products, if I'm talking about an e-commerce site, this is the way we want the products to cascade. This is the way we should organize the header, the footer, how the different sections of the homepage should cascade. That's an overly simplified description, but you don't have to be an expert in taxonomies to be a UX writer. You just want to familiarize yourself with the terminology and the language so that you can draw on the terms when it comes time to do work. Content strategy, how to plan, create, and govern content. It's not easy, especially when you're working on a big site. Even if you do create a personal site, even if it's 1, 2, 3 pages, you're going to realize pretty quickly that a lot of time, energy, and sometimes money goes into even putting together a site that's 3 pages long. So definitely you want to spend time studying content strategy, understand the importance of brand voice and messaging too, and how different consistencies manifest across different web pages, and voice charts and questionnaires. These are resources that are in my free UX writing guide, which I invite you to download from samleary.com. But different resources, different tools that you can leverage to simplify, to streamline, to fast track your process, your methodology for actually doing UX writing. In the last video, I talked about the agile methodology, as well as the waterfall methodology and the design thinking process. Voice charts can play an integral role in those processes. So I definitely encourage you to start filling those out. Define your brand voice. If you have no interest in developing a personal site or a personal brand, I would recommend filling out the voice chart for I'm just thinking that, the first large nightmare of a corporation that comes to mind, but like Walmart or, I don't know, whatever. We'll leave it at Walmart. The photos that you'll notice, the screenshots you'll notice over here, e-commerce site information architecture. This is from an article called What is Information Architecture? UX Tips and Examples. Envato Tuts Plus. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. That's just the domain, if I'm remembering correctly. But you'll notice that at the top is the homepage, and everything cascades from the homepage, be it clothing, search, accessories, cart, location, you name it. And I like looking at things at charts like this because it communicates the way in which content cascades, which is why you need to have an understanding of information architecture and content strategy. So this page I really like, and the article is 43 amazing e-commerce website design examples in 2023. I like this site because there's nothing super complicated about it. Just looking at it at first glance, you can't really even tell if it was designed by a development team and is all custom coded, or if it was WordPress with some no code builder, or if it was Squarespace or Wix or what have you. It just looks clean, and it cascades in a way that's really nicely. And I want to communicate the fact that seek out articles like this. Seek out articles that highlight great design components or great information architecture of other websites, and study those. If we can go back to the initial quote that I opened today's video with, read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. If you study different examples and you're serious about, maybe you're not taking notes, although I would definitely recommend it, but if you're serious about learning, study 1,000 examples and you will understand, how should an e-commerce site probably be organized? How should a nonprofit site be organized? So on and so forth. You can't make broad brush generalizations, but it will, again, save you time, energy, and money by studying that. So let's talk about practicing essential skills now. So there's 9 topics to learn, which I talked about in a previous video in this free course. There's conducting research, the questionnaires and voice chart, and then hierarchy, reading, watching, and doing. So first, let's talk about the 9 topics to learn. There's a starter guide video that I made that I definitely encourage you, you should check out if you haven't already. So relevance, clarity and simplicity, structure and organization, visual appeal, real world examples, practice tools and resources, expertise, authority and trust, accessibility, and staying up to date with industry trends. These are 9 different elements, different factors that can, speed up your learning process and better position you. If you can understand the language of UX writing and all of the tangentially related industries, fields, you name it, you're going to be better positioned. Even if you don't have that working experience, which I always recommend, have some personal project that you work on so that you can actually apply the skills. But understanding the language is just as important. Maybe not just as important. I would say it's slightly less important, but it is the language. It's an understanding of the language that is going to facilitate a faster learning process. So in terms of how to really research UX writing, I would just seek out type in great UX writing examples that are clear, great UX clarity examples, great UX examples for clarity, for simplicity, for relevance, for visual appeal, that sort of thing. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't overcomplicate it. I'm missing a parentheses here, but no matter, we have to continue. Conducting research, so again, joining online communities and making polls and asking questions. It's a great way that you can get answers that you might not have access to. You might not be able to find the answer that you're looking for using a search engine results page, but that's why you find a community. UX Writing Hub is great. LinkedIn, there are different communities you can join and create polls and get valuable feedback, and that's data. As I mentioned in previous videos, data is the new oil. I learned that from a Wisconsin Artificial Intelligence Summit. So it's worth knowing. And if you can throw that idea around, data is the new oil, people are receptive to that. Again, we're talking about the language of this field. It's so important. I can't emphasize it enough. So if you're too nervous, I would just research case studies. If you are afraid to put yourself out there and join online communities and create polls and take that risk of, embarrassing yourself behind a screen, which I get 100%, but also, here I am talking for 45 minutes at a time about this, just standing in whatever. I don't have to dwell on that. My point is simply, don't be nervous. Take that risk. If you really want to do this, if you want to change careers, if you want to patch your resume, if you want to build a business, take the risk. Just go for it. It's not that big of a deal. Nobody is going to remember your content. But even if you are nervous, the first step you can take is to study case studies. Research different case studies, research great UX writing examples. Call back to the quote I mentioned at the beginning. You read 1,000 books, it's going to flow like a river. You're going to know intuitively, you're going to have an understanding of what decisions you should make in certain situations. Questionnaires and voice charts. These are documents that are incredibly valuable because it's going to help you understand what actually goes into UX writing, and it's going to help you get started. You might not know right now how to build a one-page website. You might not know what words you should put on your homepage, on a sales landing page, whatever it might be. The way you can get started is with the questionnaire and the voice chart. That's in my free UX writing guide, samleary.com. Sign up for my e-newsletter and you can download it. But I recommend just getting the questionnaire, getting the voice chart, and iterating on repeat. Maybe you don't have a personal site. Maybe you don't want to make a personal site. What I would recommend then is go to one of the Fortune 500 companies. McDonald's is the site that I'm using on this slide as an example for how the information is organized, for where your eye is drawn, what the buttons look like, what the shape is, how color is being used. All of these are different UX writing elements and different UX design elements. But you could visit mcdonalds.com and you could iterate a questionnaire. You could iterate a UX writing voice chart and just repeat that. And especially now with how easy and accessible it is to leverage artificial intelligence, you can definitely complete a voice chart. I'm not saying it would necessarily be good, but you could complete a voice chart in all of 10 minutes basically by using AI and a website. So there's more that goes into it than that. It's not going to get you from A to Z, but it's a good way of just getting the wheels moving. And that is, a big part of learning is just starting and just figuring out what baby steps you can take on a daily basis to improve your comprehension of different subject matters. So I also want to talk about a learning hierarchy. That's the way I like thinking about it. So there's reading, there's watching, and there's actually doing. So I've organized these in a way that I think delivers the most value. So doing, there's no substitute for actually doing. Reading a book or watching a video is not going to be enough. I think reading and watching / listening can be great because they, again, teach you the language. They familiarize you with the terminology so that when it comes time to actually to actually take action, you have a working understanding of the domain, the professional domain that you're operating in. And that is a big part of the battle. It's not the only battle, but it's a big part. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, comments. So next up is expanding your network to be proactive. And I threw in a little LOL because sometimes it's easy to be proactive. Sometimes it's not. I tend to be more introverted. Social events kind of burn me out. I get very tired after. So it's not always easy, but there are steps you can take to get to where you need to go if you're serious about learning. Online, local professional groups, those are in person. So there's online, there's in person, and then there's keeping up with recent trends to help you navigate both of those spaces as maybe not an expert, but somebody who knows enough to skate by, and that will help you, up your game and, get to where you're trying to go. So if you look at this graphic that I've added to the right 5 ways to build your professional UX writing network, this is from the UX Content Collective, which is a great resource. Again, I'm not affiliated with them, but definitely check it out. Here's the short list of useful groups to follow, which I pulled from this article. So there's a UX Slack group, a Facebook group, UX Writing Zone Instagram, UX Writers Instagram, UX Writers Collective Instagram, UX Writers LinkedIn group, Microcopy and UX Writing LinkedIn group, and then UX UI Writing Pinterest board. Pinterest board can be a really good resource because you just, I don't know, there's something about Pinterest that's just super visual. You can take things in at a glance and in that way kind of gain an intuitive understanding of what UX writing is all about. But I really like LinkedIn groups. I found a lot of, I shouldn't say success because that's not necessarily what it is, but LinkedIn groups have proved really valuable in terms of just seeing what other industry experts are thinking in my mind, because you're getting like actual identities. It's not like Reddit where everybody's anonymous and I don't know who I can trust and who I can't necessarily. But this is where I would start if you're looking at online communities. I trust the UX Content Collective. And I just think it's a valuable resource. So also online, you can follow me. You can go to my Patreon. That's where I think these slides are probably going to live. I haven't squared it away right now, but there's going to be live streams where I answer different Q&A different questions during live Q&A sessions. My YouTube, obviously, if you made it here, you're on my YouTube. If you're still sticking around, God bless you, because we're 40 minutes in. And also my blog. So definitely go there, samleary.com. Got my blog, my free UX writing guide, etc., etc. So local professional groups is what's up next. In-person opportunities. And this is where I would like to issue a boomer alert because, chambers of commerce, I say that as a joke. Hopefully if anybody in my local community is seeing this, they don't roast me the next time I'm around, because there's nothing wrong with it. My point in saying this is just that UX writing is a new field. UX writing and even UX design. I think people are more tuned into UX design as a term, but people aren't necessarily tapped into what UX design or what UX writing is. You can't assume that everybody in a given community is going to know. So sometimes it can be a little frustrating navigating those spaces, but that's why the language is important. Understand the talking points so that when you're in those spaces, you can, rely on the words that you have stored away in your back pocket. And one thing I want to emphasize is leveraging the differences between online and offline communities, because if you can do that, it's really intimidating. Online communities can be really intimidating because you feel like everybody's an expert, everybody knows more than you, when in reality, if you step outside and you take a trip to a local chamber event or just any in-person event that isn't exclusively dedicated to UX writing, you will discover that there are not so many people who are familiar with the domain. It's like anything else, all you have to do is know this much more than somebody else, and you can start to kind of begin that learning process. And all it takes is one. You might get 1,000 no's. Ideally, you don't get 1,000 no's. That'd be pretty rare. If it takes you 1,000 no's to get one yes, the numbers aren't checking out there. So it's probably low-key sorry. But keep up with trends. That's important. r/UX Writing, the UX Writers Collective, and me. Because if you do that, therefore, you will basically be better positioning yourself to, expand your vocabulary for UX writing. You're going to give yourself a leg up basically when you're in professional settings and you have to draw on those words immediately. That's, kind of the pressure cooker that is being in physical space, being live. The words are either there or they're not, and you either have answers or you don't. So hopefully you kind of know what I'm talking about. If not, don't sweat it. Ask me a question. I'm here to help. Next up, gaining real experience. So personal projects, volunteering, and employment opportunities, and then entrepreneurship. So from a personal project standpoint, I've included this article, this link, best personal websites, 35 plus examples to blow your mind from HubSpot. This is Quentin Harris. I'm not familiar with who Quentin Harris is, but I like the site. I dig it. I like the navigation elements over here. I like the H1 tag. I'm not super crazy about the button, but that's just me being annoying and picky. But I really like the little breadcrumb action we got going on over there. The picture's cool. I can't remember if this is a video or not, but you're drawn in right away. The H1 tag pops, the button is there, and I just think it cascades nicely. This is nothing super complicated. I mean, there's obviously a lot of moving parts to a website, metaphorically speaking. But the point that I want to emphasize is that this is all you need to get started. All you need is a landscape picture that is, has a 16:9 aspect ratio. Make it your background and write, what is this? 8 words of copy in an H1 tag and, a dozen or so supporting copy that's like paragraph text and a button, and just get started. So it's not, you don't have to, build a 40-page website or anything crazy to begin. It's baby steps. And just doing it day after day, that's going to deliver you to where you want to go. So if you're building yourself a site, I'm going to recommend WordPress and then Wix or Squarespace. Those two are kind of interchangeable. I don't really use Webflow. I have some experience with Webflow, but it's just like not the work that I do oftentimes. I like working with small, medium, and your occasional large business, but small to medium, generally speaking, that's a lot of WordPress sites. At this time, I'm not, Webflow is just not what I'm interested in working with, although it's definitely something you can go with. I would say Webflow, generally speaking, is like the team you're working on has like a dedicated team of UX writers oftentimes, but maybe I'm dated a little bit, and that's not actually what the situation is. If you know, leave me a comment and correct me. So regardless, limit your planning time. I know that this kind of seems like it goes against everything that I've said. I don't think it necessarily does, because if you don't limit your planning time when you're doing your personal site, you will never start. I'm just saying that from experience. So I would say give yourself 4 weeks max to say this image is going to go here. This is going to be the copy here. Use the resources, the UX writing voice chart and the UX writing questionnaire that are in my free UX writing guide. Get your voice down pat, take the steps that you need to figure out how, what images you want where, XYZ. Use something like Canva or Figma to design a prototype, and then just go for it. And don't be afraid to fail, because you're only standing in your own way if you do otherwise. So next up is volunteering or employment opportunities. Volunteer for nonprofits. I'm in the United States. There are a lot of nonprofits that are underfunded and understaffed and need website work. That's a great place to start. There are some small businesses, but I just want to emphasize before I move on that anytime you're volunteering, be careful. I'm not sure I've necessarily heard others say this, but you need to protect your time, because truthfully, as great as getting hands-on experience is, it can become exploitative. And this is something I've talked about in other videos, but it's great to volunteer to get that experience, but this day and age, unpaid work is dangerous. And I can say that, I'm very privileged in the opportunities that I've had, but I just want to, protect you, my ideal viewer who is watching this at, minute 40 or whatever this is. Employment is really hard to figure out at the moment. There are, in terms of UX writing, like full-time jobs, it oftentimes requires a lot of work, and the onboarding process is very difficult, which is why, to some extent, going at it the entrepreneurial route is more beneficial. I didn't start a UX writing agency. I started offering UX writing as a service after I had been in business for several months and realized it was something that a lot of my clients could benefit from and quite frankly needed. But just be patient, with employment opportunities. Figure out other ways in which you can gain experience. You can volunteer, you can get internships, part-time work, contracts, you name it. But if you're starting out unpaid, just keep in the back of your mind that you want to be protective of your time. Entrepreneurship, it's not easy, especially like a new age service business. That's like, if I could go back in time, would I have just started a product business? Like, maybe I would have, I would have done that. It's like pretty difficult to start, a digital service business, and you don't actually have inventory, which is both like good and bad. But there's every way you can take is difficult. So that's why, like, if I could recommend like how to make the entrepreneurial route work, I would say start with a personal site. Build your personal site out, and it could be as simple as a homepage that's effectively just a very long, very sticky sales landing page, and a contact page for people to book calls with you. You could, from there, start volunteering, go to in-person events, you do local research, figure out who does or who doesn't have a good website, do some free work. I would recommend like 3 to 5 free jobs, regardless of, ideally they're smaller jobs that don't occupy too much time, but get a couple case studies, figure out, how things improved on the other side of the work that you did, and then refine your offer. And that is kind of how I think you can begin that process. So I'll acknowledge 100% a lot of weekend warrior stuff. Weekend warrior work goes into making this route work, but it is possible. And if you're trying to figure out how to make a full-time job work, this is the beginning. This could be, maybe you have an LLC, maybe you're just freelancing. So, it depends on, what you call it. But if you want to make the transition at this time to a full-time UX writing job, odds are you are going to need to be roughing it a little bit and having, kind of an entrepreneur's mindset. So that's all I got today. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel. I hope you'll follow my other socials. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. And download my free UX writing ebook on samleary.com when you join my e-newsletter. So I want to thank you so much for watching. I want to tell you, if you have any questions, leave a comment. I hope you like, comment, subscribe, you name it. Thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.